Today, we're going to dive into the profound, almost magical ideas of one of the great Hasidic masters, Rabbi Shmuel Bornsztain. This was a man whose wisdom was said to be so powerful, it could literally physically shield a person from harm.
I know, it sounds like something out of a fairy tale, right? But it's the central question of a true story that reveals a deep spiritual secret. It's a story about fear, about faith, and about a gesture so simple, yet so powerful, it could actually rewrite a person's destiny. All right, so our story starts in the early 20th century in a Polish town called Będzin. And here, a whole community was facing this terrifying, invisible enemy. Now, this wasn't just any random group of people. They were what's called a chabura, a special fellowship of scholars. They studied together, they prayed together, they were bound by this incredibly deep spiritual connection.
You know, at first it was just a terrible tragedy, then a weird coincidence, but pretty soon the pattern became undeniable. This plague, or whatever it wasn't random, it was targeting them. Only members of their specific group were dying.
I mean, can you even imagine the terror? This wasn't some virus you could try to avoid. To them, it felt like a judgment they just couldn't escape. The survivors were just paralyzed by this fear that their name was next on some kind of heavenly list.
So, in their complete desperation, the remaining members knew there was only one person on the planet who might have a clue what was going on, and, just maybe, have the power to stop it.
They went to Rabbi Shmuel. This man was a towering figure, a leader whose wisdom was absolutely legendary. People knew him as the Shem MiShmuel, which means the name of Samuel, after his masterpiece, a book of teachings that are still studied all over the world today.
And get this, his own father was this world-renowned genius, but another giant of that generation said that Rabbi Shmuel himself was his father's greatest creation, a living, breathing masterpiece of holiness.
I mean, look at this lineage. He came from absolute spiritual royalty. His father, the Avnei Nezer, and his grandfather, the fiery, brilliant Sochatchover Rebbe. They were two of the most influential Jewish leaders of the last couple of centuries. He inherited all of that.
So one of the last survivors of this group, a man named Rabbi Yankov Gutman, he decides enough is enough, I have to do something. He travels all the way to Sochatchov to basically plead for his life before the great sage.
And he just pours his heart out. He describes the mysterious deaths, this chilling pattern, the feeling that a heavenly decree was sealed against them. He's begging for guidance, for a ritual, for anything that could save them. But the rabbi, he doesn't offer any advice. Instead, he tells this really strange story. He talks about a disembodied soul that once came to him for help, terrified because angels of destruction were chasing it. And in the story, the rabbi says, "I simply went over and hugged the soul, holding it tightly in my arms."
You can just imagine Rabbi Yankov standing there, completely bewildered. Like, what does this weird mystical story have to do with me? He's waiting for an explanation, for some advice, but the Shem MiShmuel just goes quiet.
And then, in that silence, Rabbi Shmuel gets up, walks over to the terrified Rabbi Yankov, and does the exact thing he just described in his story. He wraps his arms around him and holds him in this powerful, protective embrace. And here's the craziest part. The plague in Będzin ended that day.
Okay, so what on earth just happened? This was not just a symbolic hug to make him feel better. According to the Shem MiShmuel's own teachings, this was a profound, mystical act, and it's rooted in a really deep understanding of how the universe actually works.
To get the hug, you have to understand a core concept in his philosophy, mekifim. The word literally means envelopments or surroundings. It's this idea that a positive, holy force can create a protective spiritual layer around a person or a place or even a moment in time, shielding it from negative energy. It's basically a spiritual shield.
And the Shem MiShmuel saw this principle working on every single level of reality. Physically, right, our skin envelops our body. Geographically, he thought that the lands of the world envelop the Holy Land. In time, the 6 ordinary workdays envelop and protect the special holiness of Shabbat. And that leads to the ultimate point. Spiritually, the actual physical presence of a righteous person could literally envelop another person in a shield of holiness. That's what the hug was. It was a physical act that created a spiritual fortress.
And this idea, using a positive enveloping force to not just block, but to actually transform a negative one, this was the absolute core of all of Rabbi Shmuel's teachings. He saw this as the secret engine of all spiritual growth.
See, for the Shem MiShmuel, a problem isn't just some obstacle you have to get over. It's the raw material for creating an even greater good. Think about it. Poverty, which can feel like a harsh judgment, becomes the very reason for charity. That act of human compassion then surrounds and transforms the original judgment into mercy. Or what about sin? A sin creates distance from God, sure, but the act of repentance it sparks, that return, can create an even deeper bond than existed before, turning the negative act itself into a source of incredible merit.
And this idea, it reaches its most, absolutely mind-bending conclusion in one last incredible story from his life, where a terrible curse becomes the hidden key to a miraculous blessing. Okay, so get this. A follower of his father was told by the sage that his future son was destined to become a Catholic priest, which for a devout Jew is a horrifying prophecy. Later, he comes to Rabbi Shmuel, who just ignores the prophecy and gives him a simple blessing for a righteous, God-fearing son. So years go by. The man has a son. He grows up to be a fine young man. Then, the unspeakable darkness of the Holocaust descends on Europe, and his entire community is rounded up to be killed. But this one young man, he survived. And how did he survive? You're not going to believe this. He was only able to escape death by successfully disguising himself as a Catholic priest. The very thing prophesied as a curse, becoming a priest, became the vessel that allowed the blessing, having a God-fearing son who would live, to be fulfilled. The negative force was completely enveloped and transformed by the positive one. And this brings us right back to that core idea. For the Shem MiShmuel, the deepest darkness always contains the potential for the greatest light. The embrace protects and the challenge transforms. And so the question he leaves for all of us is a pretty powerful one. In the middle of our own greatest challenge, what hidden blessing might just be waiting to be revealed?